arguing for a new trial. But instead of getting Anderson's testimony about Nice, the attorneys agreed to a stipulation wherein Anderson's own attorney basically recounted what Anderson would have said if she were to get on the stand and testify herself.
All right, so that begs the question, what in fact did they stipulate to?
Yeah, so I mentioned, it's a bit about an encounter at Nice's home. And just for context, in 2017, this documentary filmmaker, Shireen Anderson, in the making of that film, interviewed Rochelle Nice at her home. So when she was there, she says that she observed a photograph, a representation of Little Man on the wall of the home. And remember, there's been so much discussion about Little Man. And the allegation is that that's how Rochelle Nice referred to Connor Peterson, the unborn child of Scott Peterson, who he was convicted of killing. So here's what a briefing filed earlier this week actually states, referring to that interview. And here's a quote from the interview. There was, I should say, Anderson's interview with authorities. There was a wall of photographs of family members and kids. There was a baby, photograph of a baby in a onesie, wearing a onesie. And I think, an infant, maybe 9 months, 10 months, something like that. And on the onesie, it said Little Man. So this is what Sharon Anderson is telling investigators about what she saw at the home of Rochelle Nice. So, in this briefing by the defense team of Peterson, they go on to say it is Ms. Anderson's burden to establish that she's a radio or television news reporter or other person connected with or employed by a radio or television station. Even if Shield law applies to Ms. Anderson, her claim of immunity should be denied. Because, of course, she was asserting she didn't have to testify. Ultimately, it didn't get to that, though. Ultimately, they didn't have to have that fight because they agreed to the stipulation, both parties, and then the defense was able to get what they wanted. They got that recount through Anderson's attorney, basically saying what she would have said.
Yeah, and of course the idea being that she referred to her own son as Little Man, but she also referred to the unborn child of Lacey Peterson as Little Man, so she's making that connection, gives her a stake in the case somehow.
Yeah,
right?
and I guess meant to show some bias is what the defense is arguing.
Actually, and that's what this is all about. All right, Joy, what's next?
Yeah, so the evidentiary hearing will actually continue tomorrow. Late this afternoon, there was a police clerk involved in the investigation who was on the stand, but we'll have to see what comes out tomorrow and what witnesses continue to testify.
All right, Joy Lim-Nakran, thank you so much for that report. Truly appreciate it. I'll let you go now. Let me bring in my guest for this hour. Trial attorney Rachel Fiset is back with me. Rachel, great to see you again.
Nice to see you, Michael.
All right, so let's just start off by talking about this whole issue of Little Man, right? As Joy said, as I mentioned, the whole idea is that they want to show bias on behalf of Rochelle Nice, the fact that she had this uncommon connection. She had a son that she called Little Man, which I have to admit, a lot of us use the word little man. I'm wondering if you think that that is probative of anything. And again, you have to remember, taken in conjunction with the fact that she did answer some questions on that questionnaire. She wasn't completely honest, I guess I'll say, or at least her interpretation of the questions probably didn't lead her to give the answers that perhaps she should have given.
Yeah, I agree that the interpretation of the questions looks a little bit like it could have been a misrepresentation or at least a misunderstanding on her part. The little man, I don't know. I mean, as to what people call babies and pregnant, unborn babies inside. I think that she is showing a connection, but a woman having a connection with another pregnant woman is not particularly unusual. So what they need to show here is that she made these misrepresentations, she was lying intentionally, she had this bias, and then it affected the outcome of what actually happened.
Now, Rachel, she's already taken the stand under the cloak of immunity and said that she did not do that intentionally, that they were not, quote unquote, misrepresentations. She just, again, misunderstood the question on some point and other things. Her interpretation of words was a little different than intended on the questionnaire. Is that not enough for the court to say, hey, there's no one else that they can turn to determine whether that in fact was the case, that she wanted to mislead anyone? She says she didn't under oath.
I think they could try to bring in other evidence. I think this documentary filmmaker is interesting. That's what they were trying to bring in. But to show that she had this bias going in and that it did affect her outcome, obviously her testimony is worth something, and that's what they will have as sworn testimony and the evidence in this hearing. But if I were the defense attorney here for Scott Peterson, I mean, I think you're going to try to introduce other evidence, as they will, that she is again lying, that she was not trustworthy to begin with, and that, of course, she's not going to admit to the bias that she brought in intentionally to affect this case.
You know, Rachel, I think it's a fascinating issue, this idea that, you know, the involvement of these documentary filmmakers, and I think it's a trend that's going to continue. These types of true crime documentaries are really proliferating the market, so I'm sure we're going to see more and more of this. I want to get your thoughts on their involvement in these cases. They're often uncovering new information. They're doing interviews that adds information to cases, can make them witnesses in these cases. They want the protection that normal media get. I want to get your thoughts on if you think this is a good thing and how the justice system should handle it.
It's such an interesting question, Michael, because it is coming up so often, and we are having so many podcasts, documentary, filmmaking, and they are really cracking cases in a way. I mean, we can all think of Jinx, but there's a murder that you all were covering last week of Bo Dukes. I'm sorry, the Bo Dukes case, the Tara murder. I mean, I listened to that podcast a couple years ago. It was fascinating and being uncovered in real time. So it becomes a question as journalism has more and more avenues to get the information, and as they are uncovering information, how well they should be cloaked with the shield, not to tell. But if they're not cloaked with that shield, are we still going to get the same information? You are asking a great question, and I think anything that is on film or recorded should probably be fair game. But beyond that, I'm not sure.
And here's my question. Now, I agree with you to a point, because again, I've said earlier, anything that leads to justice, I'm all for, right? It has to be properly vetted. It has to be dealt with properly. And when you talk about things on tape and interviews being done, we have to remember they're not being, and when I say they, I mean the media or anyone, documentarians, producers, they don't have the same rules to follow. They're not taking the same oaths as attorneys. Investigators even follow certain rules. When you're doing interviews with folks under the guise of entertainment and they're not under oath, that can affect answers to questions. I think these are all important considerations as well.
I agree with you. So then they can't be analyzed under penalty of perjury. Are they analyzed then under a different standard? I mean, let's think of Tiger King, shall we? I mean, he probably was playing pretty fast and loose under the name of entertainment. And then, you know, what happens from there? So I agree. It's not the same as an investigative role. It's not the same as law enforcement, but you are getting kind of candid looks at people for various reasons. And can that just be evaluated in the same way you would evaluate kind of any hearsay statement?
You know, final question for you, Rachel, on this issue. Do you think Scott Peterson has enough here for the court to consider giving him a new opportunity to go to trial on this murder charge?
Well, I think that they're probably going to meet their burden as to whether she misrepresented on her form, so as to whether the first hurdle in jury misconduct, whether that affected her answer. I'm not sold yet that it did, that it affected the outcome of his trial.
Yeah, we've got to get testimony from other jurors to say if, you know, she went in there and had a real effect on that jury, I would think, and I don't know. I think it's a high burden, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to meet it in this case. All right, Rachel, stand by. We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, protests sparked after a Pennsylvania man died after he was shot multiple times with a police stun gun. Up next, we reveal what is happening to the 5 officers involved in the case. And then later in our Talk Back segment, after Supreme Court Justice nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearings,